morning and welcome to my YouTube channel. So this morning we're at one of the most spectacular waterfalls in Scotland called the Reekie Linn Waterfalls. It's over in the Angus area, still close to Perth and Kinross. I've never been here before, so I've read quite a lot about it, so I'm looking forward to exploring the area of the falls, finding the falls, and what I'll do is I'll explain more about the falls later on when we get there. There's two sides, so there's a north and a south. So what I'll do is I'll start off at the north side and we'll look for the viewpoint, and once I've completed photographs at the viewpoint, we'll try and explore on the south side, and that's where I can potentially get to the foot of the falls. So join me this morning and let's see how we got on at the Reekie Linn Waterfalls. Okay, well, I've reached the first viewpoint overlooking the Reekie Falls, and I have to say I can now understand why they're called one of the most spectacular falls in Scotland. They're absolutely stunning. So the top of the falls, the Reekie Falls, is actually split into two. So you've got the top half, which is 6 metres high, and then you've got the bottom half, which is 18 metres high. And when the river's in full spate, the waterfall's so full of water it actually looks like it's one single waterfall, but it's actually two waterfalls, one cascading into the other. I've just been looking around for compositions because I'm just having to be a wee bit careful, because as you've seen earlier there's warning signs that there's a 150-foot drop, and when I look just in front of my camera there is absolutely a sheer 150-foot drop down. So I've just pulled back from the edge just to make sure I'm safe. Now what I'm trying to do is just frame up a composition. I'm going to start with a landscape composition first, because I like the way that the branches of the trees here are actually framing my shot. I am using my polarizer because I want to keep the glare off the water. It is quite a cloudy morning. It's a huge contrast for last week. So last week I was out and it was 28 degrees, and this morning it's 13 degrees, so I'm quite comfortable at 13 degrees. It's nice, it's not too hot. So I'm focusing in on the centre of the falls. I've got an 1/8 of a second f8 ISO 100, and I'll take that shot, and I've got enough smoothness in the water of what I like. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to zoom in just a bit. I'll reposition my composition. Now there's a road bridge. I actually don't know how far away that is. It could be 500 yards away. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep the road bridge in the top of the frame of the composition, and I've got the waterfall sweeping from left to right, and then as it joins the river it sweeps right and then comes underneath the camera. So because I've changed my focal length, I'm just refocusing. I'll take that shot, and yep, I've got a nice shot here. What I might do, what I did notice when I was walking up the path, there's quite a lot of spots that I can stop at to get different viewpoints of the falls at this high elevation level, because ultimately what I'll try and do is once I finish this side, I'll try and walk across the road and try and find my way down to the base of the falls. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet, but we'll figure that out later on. So I'm just turning the camera around in portrait mode, and what I'm trying to do is get the full length of the falls from top to bottom, because that big branch right in front of me is actually framing the top of the water. I've just adjusted my polarizer, so I've got no highlights in the water. I've taken my shot and there's no highlights showing, so that I've got no clip-ins at all. So what I'll do now is I'll just zoom in closer. I'm conscious that I'm trying to keep that bridge in at the top of the frame. I'm just going to focus in again just to make sure I'm focused. I'll take my shot. I'll take that shot again. I'm just going to have a quick look at that image. Wow. Yeah, these falls are absolutely spectacular. So I'm just going to do a quick exposure compensation while I'm here. And what I might do is I might change lenses. I might put my zoom lens on and just get in closer to the falls from this viewpoint. Okay, so I've switched lenses, I've put the big lens on now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take photographs of the falls in different stages. So above the falls, the River Isla is flowing down, but the River Isla is flowing down under a road bridge. So what I'm doing is I've set up a composition where I've got the road bridge on the top right hand side, I've got the river flowing down, I'm at 1/8 of a second, f8, and I've had to just tweak my ISO up to 125. So I'll do a quick exposure compensation there. Now what I'm going to do next is I'll move the camera down, and what I'll try and do is get a composition at the top half of the falls. And then that way, I'm just going to zoom out just a bit, because I want the falls to come in from the left. And I want the top half of the falls, so I want the kind of the rapid cascading section of the top of the falls to come down, fall into the first half of the falls, then the second top half, and then I'll have more or less two waterfalls, one on the right and one on the left. So I'm just going to focus in on the falls. I'll take that shot. I've still got f8, I've still got 1/8 of a second, and I've still got ISO 125. I'm just going to view that image. Yeah, that's really nice. I like the streakiness of the water. I'm just going to drop it to ISO 100 and just see what difference that makes. Yep. So I'm going to do a quick exposure compensation. And then what I'll do now is I'll move to the bottom half of the falls. So the top half of the falls that I'm photographing is the 6 metre height. Now what I'll do is I'll move to the bottom half of the falls, which is the 18 metre section. So what I'll do is, actually, do you know, this could make quite a nice panoramic as well. But let me focus on getting this image finished. So I'm focusing in on the rocks at the bottom of the falls. And again, I'm down to ISO 100, f8, and 1/8 of a second. I'm just doing a quick exposure compensation just in case I need those over or underexposed images when I go back, when I'm doing my post-processing. I'm just going to tweak the ISO up to 125th, because I like the way that the trees are actually framing the bottom of the falls. So what I'll do now is I'm going to do a panoramic image, but it's more of a close-up. So I'm going to get a close-up image into the top of the falls and then work my way down, because the lens I used before was a 24-70, and that gives me a wide angle perspective. But what I'll do is I'll take 3 or 4 images, crop them together, and then we'll have a close-up view of the falls. So now I'm just turning the camera over to portrait, And what I'll do is I'll try and get a single image here. I'm just going to focus in on the falls. Just double check I've got my polarizer in the right place. There. Just going to tweak the ISO. So I'm still at 1/8 of a second, f8 ISO 125. You know, there's a nice path. I've just noticed there's a nice path that way along the side of the gorge, and there's a lot of tree roots coming out, so I might take a photograph of the path before we move on for this spot, because there's more viewpoints that I want to try and get images from. So I'm just going to take another shot from this area. I'm just reducing the ISO to 100, and now what I'll do is a quick exposure compensation, just in case I need the highlights for the tree. It might work, it might not work. There's quite a lot of overlap with these branches coming down. Hopefully I can either miss them or crop them out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to have a wee look and see. I'll take my polarizer off. I'll put that in my pocket just now. I'm just going to up my ISO so I can see what I'm doing. Right, so that would be better placed as a portrait shot. The reason I'm doing an exposure compensation here is because when I follow the path, when I look through the fence, the field in the background's been blown out because I've been focusing in on the path. So now I've got an underexposed shot, I can bring the detail in from the field in the distance. So having said that, I'm just double checking that I've actually got that detail that I'm looking for. And yep. Alright, so I think what we'll do now is I'll put the polarizer back on so I don't forget it's in my pocket, and then we'll move back the way and we'll look for new compositions along the way, because there is a viewpoint right above the top fall, but there's a really nice tree that I noticed as I was walking past that had some really nice textures on it, and I think that might make quite a nice leading line. So I'll stop rabbiting on and we'll move forward to the next viewpoint. Okay, I've just moved probably 100 yards up the path, and I've got this viewpoint. It's actually it's pretty restricted actually because of all the branches going right in front of me. So what I've got, I'm still sitting at f8, I've still got an 1/8 of a second, but I've had to increase my ISO to 160 because it's quite dark in here. So I focused in on the falls. I've got a branch coming down, as you'll see on that tree there, and it's actually about that much coming into the top of my frame. But what I might do is just take that out in post-processing because it just looks so out of place. But what I'm going to do is just pull back my focus, because there's an old abandoned water station hut over there that's quite difficult to make out. So let me just see if I can zoom in on that area, and then that way we can get that old hut in focus. I've left my settings at f8, an eighth of a second, and ISO 160. I've now got that in the image, and now what I'll do is I'll probably flip the camera over and I'll take a landscape shot, and let me just see how that looks. Yep. I'm just trying to see if I can come back a wee bit further. I might have to change my lens again, because the zoom lens is just a wee bit too tight. Now there's a cave at the foot of the falls below the water house, and it's a famous cave, and it's called the Black Dub Cave. So what I'll do is I'll try and zoom in and get the water house, the old derelict water house, and the cave in focus. And I've just got about a quarter of the falls there. I'm just checking I've got the old water house in focus. Yep, I'll do a quick exposure compensation for that. And I keep looking over the other side of the river to see how easy it can be to work my way down. So it could be tricky. So what we'll do now is we'll move further up the river, and I'll change my lens, and then we'll look for viewpoints that's further up, and then I'll look for that viewpoint where I'm above the top of the fall, and I'll look for that tree that I mentioned earlier that could be quite a nice leading line. But you never know, there might be interesting places before we reach there. Okay, so I'm at the foot and the top of the Black Dub Falls, the Reekie Linn Falls. It's just because I'm right on top of the Black Dub Cave, so I can see the cave as well. So what I'm doing is I'm just setting up a composition for the falls, and I've focused in at the top of the falls beside the rocks, because the old water house is further down on the left hand side. I've been playing about with my shutter speeds, but I've went back to f8, an eighth of a second, and ISO 100. So I've done a quick exposure compensation of the falls here. What I might do is I'll zoom in to the top of the falls, and I'll see if that makes quite a nice composition. Actually, I'm going to do a portrait shot because that helps. The other thing I'm noticing is So the reason I'm noticing that it's getting quite sticky and there's quite a bit of mist coming off the falls, and it's a really fine mist, but it's difficult to see it. I noticed when I look back the way, which we'll take photographs of because the gorge is absolutely beautiful, you see the fine mist in the gorge. And the reason, that's another reason that the Linn Waterfall has its name. So the Linn Waterfall, Reekie actually means misty, and Linn is a deep pool. So the Linn Waterfall, we mentioned earlier, the top half is 6 metres, the bottom half is 18 metres. But the dark pool at the bottom of the waterfall, they reckon that's about 30 metres deep. So it's quite a significant waterfall, and quite a dangerous one if you're not being careful. So I'm just doing a quick exposure compensation. Now what I'll do is I'm going to turn round and I'm going to focus in on the cave, Black Dub's cave. So that I'm going to take the polarizer off because it's quite dark in that cave area, and to be fair, there's no water. So what I'm trying to do is get a composition in such a way that I've got the old water house and the cave in the composition. I'm going to focus in on the edge of the cave because there's a lot of ferns in there. I'll take that shot. Now what I'll do is I'll do an exposure compensation because that will give me some real highlights and bright exposures that I can use so that we can see inside the cave. I'm not so sure I'm actually going to get down. Well, maybe not today. Maybe in different weather we'll try that. So it gives us a good excuse to come back another time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the camera around and we're going to face away from the falls and down the gorge just so you can see the beautiful view, and I'll try and get some pictures. Okay, so I've just come the other side of that viewpoint, so I'm looking down the gorge and I'm just setting up an image here where I'm just adjusting the polarizer because the river actually snakes down and does like a zigzag through the trees. But the trees, I'm just going to turn it over into portrait orientation because some of the trees are spectacular. It's actually, do you know, it actually reminds me of a kind of Canadian type scene with a deep gorge and the tall trees. So what we've got here is I'm just changing my settings. I'm going back to 1/8 of a second. I had my ISO up at 1600 there, so I'm dropping the ISO down to 200. I'm just going to focus in on the main tree down the bottom because that's the tree that I want in focus. So I've got f8, 1/8 of a second, I'm up to ISO 200. And the reason I'm up to ISO 200, I'm just going to move the polarizer around because I want to get the, I still want the ability to be able to see through the water. So I'm just doing a quick exposure compensation here because there are some extreme dark areas, but I also want the tree to pop. So what? There's actually another tree I've just spotted. So there's a second tree, a smaller one, that's in the composition. So what I'll do is I've just turned the camera around just a bit to the left. I'll do another exposure compensation shot. I'm going to have to check my lenses because I'm feeling really sticky because of all the mist that's coming off the waterfall. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some close-up shots of the river. So because I'm above the river, and this is the River Isla, so I'm going to, there's an S-bend. So I'll see if there's a way that I can get an image of the S-bend from up here. So I'll just zoom back in now. I'll change back to landscape mode. And what I'm looking for is the river coming in. There's a tree right in front of me. But what I'm actually looking for is the river coming in and then swirling round and then sweeping out on the top left hand side. So I'm reducing the ISO to 125. I'm just refocusing. I've got to check my polarizer again because I've moved the orientation of the camera to landscape. So I've just changed that. I'll take that shot. My single shot is quite underexposed, but that's okay, because I can always bring back the shadows. I'm still shooting at f8, and again, that could be quite a nice image. The sun was supposed to rise in that direction, so if you check the photographer's euphemesis, that actually shows you the sunrise, the sunset, the moonrise and the moonset. So it's a good app to use if anybody's interested. Right, so I've taken the shots here that I'm going to take, and what we'll do is we'll move further along and then we'll eventually become on top of the waterfall. So I've found the tree that I was looking for that I saw earlier. So now what I'm just doing is I'm just updating the settings. It's quite dark in here, so the only thing is I don't want to over brighten it either because I don't want any highlights. So I've set the exposure back to 1/8 of a second because there's still running water coming underneath the branch, because I'm at the top of the waterfall, and where I am, I'm quite elevated because I'm behind this tree, but to the right hand side of that tree there's a path, and that path takes me right on top of the falls. So once we've taken this image, we'll then move to the top of the falls and see what compositions we can get from the falls, either downriver or upriver. But let's focus on this. I've got ISO 250, I've focused in to the centre of the tree. I've still got my polarizer on because I want to make sure I cut any glare from the water. I'll take that shot. What I'll also do is an exposure compensation. I've also got the Black Dub Cave. Because I've come down, I'm kind of halfway down the elevation from where I was. I'm very close to the Black Dove Cave. So there's a good chance we can get some more images of the cave. Well, only if they're worthwhile, that is. Right, so I've taken this image. What I might do is move further down towards the branch and see if I can get another composition that gives me a different leading line. So I've reached the top of the falls. This is quite tricky because the top of the falls, the water's really bright, and I'm really struggling to get the right compensation and shutter speed here. So I've increased my shutter speed to 1/15 of a second, I've reduced my ISO to 100, and I've reduced my f-stop to 6.3. So I'm just doing a quick exposure compensation. The problem I've got is it's really hard to focus on running water. So what I've done is I've focused on the rock on the faraway bank. and hopefully that gives me enough. Yes, actually I'm not, you know, I looked at the back of the camera and the screen's quite small, so it's really hard to tell if this is actually going to work out or not. What I'll do is I'm going to zoom in on the rock at the back, because I quite like that composition, and that might, and I'm saying might, so there's a little canopy of the tree sticking down as well over there, but I'm conscious I want the water, so I'm going to leave ISO at 100. I'm going to focus in on those leaves that I can see, and then I'll do an exposure compensation and bring them together, because I don't want highlights in the water if I can avoid it. But because of the settings I've got at a 15th of a second f6.3 and ISO 100, it's quite an underexposed shot, but it needs to be underexposed even though I've got the polarizer on, to get the water and the whiteness in the water, because if I go too bright I'll just blow the highlights in the water. So I'll do an exposure compensation, and then I'll take the brighter exposure components of the rock, of the trees, of the background, and I'll probably merge that in to the final image. So there's a nice image here of the River Isla and that road bridge. So what I'll do is, that's actually really nice. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit and I'll focus in on the bridge. Well, I'm just going to have a wee seat. Hopefully that water noise isn't too much, because I am right above the waterfall, which, if you take the calculations, 18 plus 6 is 24 metres high. It's quite a significant drop from here. I'm going to have my breakfast bar and just going to chill out for a wee while, because there's a few other exposures I want to get. I'll change the lens and we'll use the longer lens in this area and see if there's any close-up shots we can get of flowers or little thistles with the water in the backdrop. There's the, further up the Glen Ira River, there's a wee bit more kind of a little weir, so I might be able to get some shots of that. So yeah, first time I've ever been to the Reekie Falls. They're definitely spectacular. I can understand from a tourist point of view and from the material that I've read how they've described them as one of the most spectacular falls in Scotland, and they are absolutely beautiful, an amazing setting. The setting's absolutely stunning. The only thing is, I'll need to come back another day and I'll need to do more research of how I climb over the other side safely and get down to the foot of the falls and work my way along. So I would rather have better weather to do that, and we might do that in the future, and it gives me something to come back for. But the Reekie Linn Falls, absolutely a hit, must come and visit. So if you're ever in Scotland, please come and visit the Reekie Linn Falls. They're fantastic. So again, Reekie means misty, so there's a lot of spray floating around, so everything's getting a bit damp. So Reekie means misty, Linn means dark. So in a big pool, and at the bottom of the falls we've got that alleged 30 metre deep pond or pool, which I don't fancy trying out. So I hope these images have turned out from this morning. It's been a great wee trip, I've really enjoyed it, in fact I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'll stop rabbiting on, I'm going to have my breakfast bar and finish my coffee, and then we'll take more photographs. What I'm also going to do is, in front of me, there's a big tree but there's a pool, but there's a small set of, I'm not going to say rapids, but there's a small set of running water, and I've got a little bit of frame from the trees on the right hand side. There's a rock slap bang in the centre of the image, so I'm going to focus in on that rock. I'll just zoom in again because try that as a shot. And I've still got my 1/5 of a second because I don't want the water. Oh, that's actually really nice. So I've got the small kind of running water in front of me, I've got a rock in the middle, and then I've got that series of sticks that I mentioned earlier just topping the frame of the image. What I might do now is there's a small pool over here just lying underneath the water, and what I'll do is I'm going to focus in on the leaves of the tree, and then I'll zoom out. I'll just increase the ISO to 160. I'm just going to adjust the polarizer to get rid of the highlights on the top of that running water. I'll just turn this round because it's like a little calm pool with a little rock sticking out. But there's a couple of trees, one on the right hand side, one on the left, and the way that it looks like a pine tree, and the way that the leaves in the pine tree are falling, it looks as though they're fanning. So I'll take that shot and see how that works. Got my camera set up on the rocks. I'm focusing in on a thistle, and I've got the bright white water in the background, so I'm hoping that's not too distracting. I can bring that down, so I've got a 15th of a second f11 and ISO 100. It's probably showing me it's a little bit more overexposed just because of the brightness of the water. So the other thing I was going to do, there was a bluebell dropping just down here, but the problem with the bluebell was it's got a bright background with white water, so that's not going to work. There's a bluebell further down here that I can see if I can get a shot of that bluebell. I'm just adjusting because I need to be above the water line so that I've got darkness. I want a dark background for that bluebell. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that video this morning. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do, you know it's free. If you press the bell notification, that'll let you know the next time I post a video. So thank you from the Reekie Linn Falls, and here's to the next video.